Sharon Kinney. Sharon Elizabeth Hall was born on November 30th, 1939, in Independence, Missouri, to parents Eugene and Doris. Following her birth, Sharon spent some time growing up in Washington state, but by the age of 15, she and her family had returned to her birthplace. In 1956, now aged 16, she met 22-year-old Brigham Young University student James Kinney at a church function. The couple dated from the summer that year until the autumn, when James returned to university. However, shortly after his departure, Sharon penned the 22-year-old a letter explaining that she had fallen pregnant with his child. James felt it was his responsibility to now look after Sharon and the child, and so he returned to Independence, and the couple married on October 18th, 1956. Sharon's age was falsely listed as 18 at the time. About a year after they married, the pair had a second, more formal wedding. By this time, Sharon, who had not actually been pregnant in the first place, had explained away her lack of baby by claiming she'd miscarried. However, she did eventually end up pregnant, giving birth to a daughter named Dana in the autumn of 1957. Following their second wedding ceremony, Sharon and James spent some time living in Provo, Utah, before returning to Independence, where they both got jobs, Sharon as a babysitter and James as an electrical engineer at Bendix Aviation, where he mostly worked nights. Sharon was keen on a life of luxury. She often spent large sums of money on frivolous things and attempted to live well beyond her means. She and James initially lived in a rented home next to his parents, but eventually built their own home, a ranch-style house, elsewhere in the city. Eventually, Sharon grew restless. She'd had another baby, a boy named Troy, and she'd become bored of being a mother and a wife, and yearned for excitement. As her husband was always working nights, she turned her attention to other men and began engaging in affairs. One of these relationships was with an old high school friend, John Bolditz. By 1960, James was considering divorcing Sharon. He suspected that she was carrying on with other men and was also frustrated by her reckless spending habits. On March 18th, he spoke with his parents about the matter. Devout Mormons, James's parents encouraged him to stay and make their marriage work. He told them that Sharon would agree to the divorce if she was able to retain the house, keep custody of their daughter, and he paid her $1,000 in alimony. Still, James's parents insisted that the couple had simply hit a rough patch and just needed time to sort things out together. The next day, at around 5:30 p.m., Sharon heard a gunshot ring out from the direction of the master bedroom. She would later tell the police that when she went to investigate, she discovered the couple's 2-year-old daughter, Dana, sitting on the bed next to her father. He had a gunshot wound to his head, and Dana was holding his .22 caliber handgun. According to Sharon, James must have been cleaning the weapon when he decided to take a nap. He must have left the gun out as he went to sleep. Emergency services were promptly called to the scene, but James was declared dead by the time he arrived at the hospital. After his death, law enforcement began to investigate the incident. They were unable to obtain prints from the pistol's grip, however, and then failed to carry out testing for gunshot residue on both Sharon and Dana. Speaking with friends and relatives of the family, investigators discovered that the 2-year-old was known to play with firearms unattended, and in a test carried out by the police, Dana proved her ability to pull the trigger on a gun, which was the same make and model of her father's. As there was no evidence to prove it was anything else, James's death was ruled as an accidental homicide. After the investigation was closed, James was buried, and his wife collected on his life insurance policies, which were both the modern-day equivalent of around $230,000. Using this money, Sharon bought herself a new Ford Thunderbird from a car salesman named Walter T. Jones on April 18th. Walter and Sharon began an affair shortly thereafter. While Sharon wanted to get married again and thought Walter would be the perfect second husband, he already had a wife, 23-year-old Patricia Jones, his high school sweetheart with whom he had 2 children. In May that year, Sharon asked Walter to go to Washington with her. However, he declined her offer, and so she took her brother Eugene instead. Upon her return, she met up with her boyfriend and told him that she was pregnant with his baby. Sharon was sure that this would tip the scale in her favor, that Walter would have a strong reason to leave his wife and be with her, but Walter didn't announce that he would divorce his wife. Instead, he ended the couple's affair. Following the breakup on May 26th, Sharon decided to call Patricia and tell her that her husband was having an affair with Sharon's sister. The pair met to discuss the situation that evening, and according to Sharon, she dropped Patricia off a few blocks from home afterwards. But Walter reported that his wife never made it back to their house. He alerted the police to her uncharacteristic disappearance the following morning. Once he had notified the authorities, he began to call Patricia's friends and loved ones, looking for somebody who may have seen her. One of her friends, who carpooled to and from work with her, informed him that the 23-year-old had discussed being approached by a woman who wanted to meet her. Patricia asked the carpool driver to drop her on a street corner in Independence, and the friend had noticed another woman waiting in a car nearby. They didn't recognize the woman, but gave Walter her description, which was immediately familiar to him. After hanging up, Walter called Sharon and asked if she had seen or spoken with his wife. She admitted that she had, and informed him that she'd told Patricia of the affair. She then claimed that she'd last seen the 23-year-old when she dropped her off near their house. Sharon said that Patricia began speaking with an unknown man in a green 1957 Ford shortly before Sharon drove off. Walter and Sharon met later that evening, where he insisted that she provide more details about Patricia's last known movements. He would later admit that he had threateningly held a key to Sharon's throat. That same day, on May 27th, shortly before midnight, Sharon and John Bolditz, whom she had an ongoing affair with, discovered Patricia's body in a secluded lover's lane outside the city. She had been shot 4 times by a .22 caliber pistol, sustaining 2 wounds to her shoulder and 1 to her abdomen. The fatal shot was to Patricia's head. The bullet entered near her mouth at an upwards trajectory. She is estimated to have died at 9 p.m. on May 27th. Powder burns on the hemline of Patricia's skirt, which had been pushed up to her waist, indicated that the gun had been fired at close range at least once, and a white powdery substance discovered in her hair led investigators to initially theorize that she had been killed elsewhere and dumped in the secluded area. However, it was later determined that the substance was fly eggs. As no other crime scene could be located, the notion that this was not the crime scene was dismissed. Authorities attempted to locate the murder weapon and the bullet which had passed through Patricia's abdomen. They searched the lover's lane with the help of a group of Boy Scouts, but they were never able to recover the weapon, despite going so far as to empty nearby bodies of water. The bullet, however, was eventually discovered buried in the ground, underneath the body. On May 28th, Walter, Sharon, and John were all questioned. Both John and Walter admitted to dating Sharon in written statements. On June 1st, they both took polygraph tests, which they passed. Sharon, however, would not put anything down in writing and refused to take a polygraph. Her brother, Eugene, was also questioned on March 31st, although he opted not to talk to investigators. That same day, at 11 p.m., Sharon was arrested for Patricia's murder. The Jackson County Sheriff caught wind of her arrest and asked the prosecutors to consider a second murder, that of James Kinney. Following her arrest, Sharon was released on a $20,000 bond. Her preliminary hearing was scheduled for June 16th. Meanwhile, the gun used in the death of her husband was ruled out as being the murder weapon in Patricia's case. It was still locked up and under the possession of the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. Reportedly, after James's death, Sharon attempted to get the gun back, but it was never returned to her. A male friend of hers then came forward and admitted that he had purchased a .22 caliber handgun for the widow and registered it under her name, but she had asked him to re-register it under another. However, the weapon couldn't be found inside her house. Sharon originally claimed that she had lost it on her trip to Washington, then recanted this story and said it had gone missing at some point. In mid-June, Sharon's trial was delayed as she was heavily pregnant with her 3rd child. She gave birth to a second daughter, Marla, on January 16, 1961. On June 13, 1961, Sharon's trial for the murder of Patricia Jones began. The prosecution cited both Walter and a police lieutenant named Harry Nesbitt as evidence of the motive behind the crime. Nesbitt recalled that Sharon had stated, "I was afraid I was losing him. He acted funny." Meanwhile, Walter told the court about how he had broken off the relationship after Sharon told him that she was pregnant. The prosecution alleged that Patricia had been killed because Sharon wanted Walter all to herself. However, they were unable to firmly establish if she owned, or had once owned, the handgun that killed the 23-year-old. After calling 27 witnesses, the prosecution rested its case on June 21st. Meanwhile, Sharon's defense team focused on breaking down the motive and means of the crime, claiming the mother of three had no reason to kill Patricia, and stating that the weapon that allegedly belonged to her had not been proven to be the murder weapon. The jury spent just over an hour and a half deliberating before acquitting Sharon of the charge. They had found too many loopholes in the prosecution's case. Bizarrely, immediately after the verdict was announced, one juror asked Sharon for her autograph. She obliged before she was returned to jail to await the next trial. On January 8, 1962, the jury selection process began for Sharon's second murder trial. The prosecution's case heavily relied on their contention that she was so interested in seeing her husband gone from her life that she was willing to pay for it. They had John Balditz testify about the time that Sharon had offered to pay him $1,000 to kill her husband. However, John undermined his own testimony by claiming that Sharon may have been joking. This caused the prosecution to attack the character of their own witness. The prosecution also explained that James and Sharon's marriage was on the verge of breaking down at the time of his death, and noted that she'd been engaging in extramarital affairs, which had caused the divide between the couple. They pointed out that Sharon would only be able to collect James's life insurance money if she was still his wife. Sharon's defense, for their part, focused on the fact that much of the evidence in the case was circumstantial, and called John Balditz a poor, mixed-up kid who would sign anything, and attacked the reliability of his testimony. They also observed that the police, during their original investigation, had thought James's demise was obviously accidental, and presented testimony which supported the idea that James had often left guns in reach of his children, and that Dana could pull triggers on toy guns which were stiffer than the one on the .22 caliber, which had killed him. The jury deliberated for over 5.5 hours before returning a guilty verdict on January 11th. In April, Sharon was sentenced to life in prison and began to serve time in the Missouri Reformatory for Women. Her deceased husband's family continued to believe that Dana had been responsible for the death and that it had been nothing more than a tragic accident, stating, "We still don't feel that she committed murder." Sharon, for her part, told reporters that the verdict was a mistake. A week after her conviction, Sharon's lawyers requested that she be released on bond, which was supported by a petition signed by 132 individuals who thought she was innocent. However, the motion was denied, as first-degree murder was not a bailable offense. In response, Sharon's defense then requested that the conviction be vacated, because the jury had delivered a verdict based on surmise and speculation, rather than substantial evidence. They went on to list some errors that they alleged had been made before and during the trial. While this was denied by a judge in April 1962, the Missouri Supreme Court reversed the conviction in March 1963. A new trial was ordered on the basis of Sharon's defense having been denied adequate preemptory challenges during jury selection. She was denied bail in May that year, but 2 months later was released on a $25,000 bond which had been posted by her brother. As her second trial was scheduled, Sharon and her 3 children moved in with her mother. Her next trial began on March 23, 1964, but a mistrial was declared shortly afterwards because a law partner of one of the prosecutors had once been retained by one of the jurors. Sharon's third trial started on June 29th that year. A new witness testified for the prosecution, a female acquaintance of the mother of 3, who stated Sharon once joked that the witness should, quote, "get rid of the woman's old man, like Sharon did." During this trial, Sharon took the stand to declare that she was innocent of all charges. A second mistrial was declared when the jury deadlocked 7-5 in favor of acquittal. Her fourth trial was scheduled for October of 1964. However, while free on bail, Sharon traveled to Mexico with her alleged new lover, a man named Francis Pugliese. She left her children in the care of their grandfather and traveled under the pretense that she and Francis were a married couple, using the name Jeanette Pugliese. Technically, although the bail itself wouldn't have prevented Sharon from traveling out of the state, the company that posted her bail prohibited her from doing so without explicit written consent from themselves. Thus, her going out of state went against the conditions the company had set. In Mexico, Sharon and Francis registered as a married couple at Hotel Gin. While in the country, Sharon purchased a weapon, claiming that she felt unsafe as she was unfamiliar with Mexico. However, she and Francis had also brought 1 to 2 weapons with them across the border, so it's unclear why Sharon required a third gun. On the night of September 18th, 1964, the mother of 3 left the hotel alone. While out, she encountered Francisco Ordóñez, a Mexican-born US citizen, at a bar. She went back to his hotel with him, later telling the police that he had wanted to show her some photographs he had taken. However, in the hotel room, Sharon claimed, Francisco made sexual advances towards her, and so she fired her gun at him in self-defense. She stated that she simply wanted to scare him off. Instead, she shot him in the chest, killing him immediately. The sound of the gunfire drew the attention of a hotel employee who entered the room and narrowly avoided being killed by Sharon too. The employee was shot in the shoulder and he promptly fled the scene, closing the door behind him, locking Sharon in the room until authorities arrived. The police did not believe Sharon's version of events. They suspected that she had attempted to rob Francisco and had shot him when he didn't comply. She was quickly arrested for homicide and assault with a deadly weapon. The mother of 3 maintained that she didn't want to hurt anybody, but had to defend herself. The police discovered the gun and ammo in her handbag, and further guns and ammo in the hotel room she was sharing with Francis. Francis was also arrested. His crimes included entering the country illegally and carrying an unlicensed firearm. One of the weapons retrieved from the hotel was found to be the same one which had killed Patricia Jones, but because Sharon had been acquitted, she could not be retried for this crime. Both Francis and Sharon were tried in the summer of 1965. Francis was cleared and deported back to the US, while Sharon was found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. She attempted to appeal her conviction, but was given a further 3 years behind bars, as the court didn't believe that she'd been given a long enough sentence. In jail, she was nicknamed the Gunfighter, a name which was soon after adopted by the media.
A well-respected deacon of Rising Daughters Baptist Church in Waverly, Georgia, and his wife was brutally slain in the church in March 1985. For 36 years, their slaying has been attributed to robbery, illegal substances, or revenge. For 2 decades, a man has been wrongfully imprisoned for a crime he did not commit, but the real perpetrator was finally arrested. 66-year-old Harold Swain and his wife, 63-year-old Thelma Swain, were fatally shot on March 11, 1985, during a Bible study class at Rising Daughters Baptist Church in Waverly. Harold was a retired pulpwood worker, a handyman, a volunteer firefighter, a member of the county jury commission, and a spokesperson for the black community. Thelma was also closely involved with church affairs. She was a devoted wife and surrogate mother to their niece, LaFane Kite, whom they raised from infancy. The couple had been married for over 43 years. They were described as an exemplary couple, well-liked by members of the community. LaFane said that they were gentle people who liked to fish, garden, and participate in church activities. They lived in a ranch-style house not far from the church. Harold's brother, Robert, recalls that Harold was always happy, jolly, and laughing. He said that these things came naturally to him because of his love and kindness for everyone. He would always go out of his way to help someone at any time. If someone needed a favor and he was able to do it, he would do it. Robert said that Thelma was the same way about helping people. Everyone loved and respected them. At 7 p.m. on the night they were shot, Harold and Thelma held their weekly Monday night Bible class at the church. 9 women from several area churches attended. At around 8:50 p.m., one of the women, Vanzola Williams, excused herself early to go pick up her daughter at work. On her way out, she encountered a man leaning against the wall in the church vestibule. She asked if she could help him, and he said that he needed to speak to someone. When she asked who, he said, "Somebody in there." When they opened the doors, the man pointed to Harold and said, "I want to talk to him." Vanzola went back to the church and told Harold about the man. Harold went to talk to the man as Vanzola went on her way. As she was leaving, she heard them talking, and just seconds later, the man pulled out a gun. Harold tried to wrestle the gun away from the man. However, he was unsuccessful, and the man shot Harold 4 times, 3 times in the chest and once in the back of his head. Thelma ran out to the vestibule where the man shot her once in the upper chest area. One of the women fainted while some of the others hid behind the pews. Others ran to the kitchen and pastor's office where they tried to call for help, but the church's telephone lines were cut. Vanzola, who heard the shots, ran around the church, came in through the back door, and joined them. 20 minutes passed while the women waited in fear. Finally, one of them, Marjorie Moore, armed herself with a broom and made a dash for her car. She noticed an unfamiliar vehicle in the parking lot. The shooter escaped the building and drove away in a battered brown car. She then went to a nearby convenience store to summon help. Sadly, it was too late. Harold and Thelma were deceased. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation was brought in, and a massive manhunt started in Waverly. Harold and Thelma were personal friends of Camden County Sheriff Bill Smith and his family. He said that when he arrived at the scene, there was a lot of confusion. No one really knew what had happened. They did not know what the facts were or who the suspect was. They also did not know why he did it. The couple did not appear to be the type of people who would be victims of a slaying plot. Harold and Thelma were found lying in pools of blood. No blood samples were taken, as the authorities assumed that all the blood belonged to the couple. There was a lot of physical evidence found at the scene, including 5 bullet casings, 5 blue plastic shirt buttons, 2 Pepsi bottles, a smudged vestibule mirror, 4 pieces of cut telephone line, the telephone box, which had smudges or fingerprints on it, and 2 pairs of glasses. 1 pair of glasses belonged to Harold. They were unable to determine who the other pair belonged to, but they believe it could have been the perpetrators. When the police discovered the glasses, they investigated the theory that the perpetrator may have been a transient. The church is located on busy Highway 17. Transients would often stop by for a handout or a free meal. Motorists would also stop there to ask for gas money or other assistance. But if robbery was the motive, why were over $300 left in Harold's wallet? Other evidence suggests that the crime was premeditated because of the telephone lines that were cut. Vanzola clearly saw the man. She said that he was calm. She thought that he was there for a handout. She did not think he was there to hurt anyone. She did not see a weapon or anything on him. He was a young white man, and he was wearing scuffed boots. He had long, shoulder-length blonde hair. However, she said that she did not look at him too much because she wanted to leave. The police attempted to create a picture of the suspect using an identikit, but the eyewitnesses did not agree on many of the details. An artist was brought in to sketch a composite drawing. For 5 months, the police searched for the suspect using the sketch, but no new leads. The case eventually went cold, but was reopened 13 years later in 1998, which led to the arrest of then 38-year-old Dennis Perry in 2000. Although Perry proclaimed his innocence, he was convicted in 2003 for the slaying of Harold and Thelma. The Georgia Innocence Project said Perry's conviction was largely based on circumstantial and character evidence, because during the original 1985 investigation, the police found a pair of glasses with hairs stuck in the hinges that they believed belonged to the perpetrator. Although DNA testing in 2003 found that the hairs did not belong to Perry, he was still convicted. According to the Georgia Innocence Project, to avoid the end-of-life penalty, Perry accepted a deal in which he waived his right to file a direct appeal. Perry was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences in prison. He has always emphatically maintained his innocence. Throughout his arrest, his trial and conviction, and every single day of the nearly 21 years he spent incarcerated. Perry's big break in the case came in 2018 when he became the subject of the podcast Undisclosed. The podcast thoroughly investigated the case and identified an alternative suspect. When the DNA of the hairs found on the glasses was tested on a family member of the alternative suspect, it was found to be a match. In May 2020, attorneys with the Georgia Innocence Project and an Atlanta-based international law firm, King and Spalding, presented a judge with a wealth of new DNA evidence to prove that Perry was innocent. In a matter of months, Perry was free from prison and back home in the loving embrace of his wife and the gaggle of kids and grandkids who adore him. His wrongful conviction stole decades of his life, and with Perry's exoneration came a tidal wave of new questions. How did the justice system get this case so wrong? And if Perry did not commit the crime all those years ago, who did? On August 6, 2020, investigators executed a search warrant at a home located at 1680 Stafford Road in Waynesville, which had been occupied by the suspect, Eric Spar, and his mother, Gladys Spar. In December 2024, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation took a step toward answering some of those questions. They arrested and charged a man they accused of the slaying at Rising Daughter Baptist Church nearly 40 years ago. But that arrest, coupled with Perry's exoneration, has reopened old wounds in this rural Georgia community. 61-year-old Spar has been charged with 2 counts of slaying for the slaying of Harold and Thelma Swain, and 2 counts of aggravated assault. Spar was arrested without incident